All right. Hey, good afternoon, guys. Oh, excuse me. Hey, it looks like we've got really good attendance today. Lots of people on the line, so I'm glad I waited a couple extra minutes to get started. And it is exactly 1:01. I'm a minute early, so we'll get started today. We're going to do the third installment of our fourth quarter workshop that revolves around what we call the lawn care danger zone. And it's so far it's gone really well. The first two sessions have been really well attended, and the feedback's been really good. So as we get going here, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you'd like to ask questions, they are obviously always encouraged, and if you can type them into the panel, the control panel on your GoToMeeting deal you've got up there on the computer, that would be great. As long as everybody can hear me okay, we'll go ahead and get rolling. If you can't hear me, please let me know right away. And nobody says anything, so either nobody can hear me or everybody can hear me just fine, which is good. So before we get rolling today, I wanted to mention quickly that we've got a live training session this week for those members of the BeSafe network, or new members of the BeSafe network. As you know, we do our training, what we call the Organic Lawn Care Institute, throughout the winter. And we've got a session coming up on Friday, this Thursday and Friday, the 4th and 5th here in Manchester, New Hampshire. We've had a couple of people have to reschedule coming this time, mainly because I'm surprised at how many people are still out on lawns. That snowfall we got early on has melted in a lot of places, and everybody's trying to catch up. I keep hearing about fall cleanups. I was actually talking to one of our best BeSafe guys down in Kentucky, and he had a ton of winterizer applications to do. And he said he typically will go into December, but he had fallen behind because they had some significant snowfall early on, and it's kind of disappeared. So we do have spots available, and I'm gonna open that up to anybody who on this call who wants to come to the training session. Obviously, it's a hike for lots of you guys, but here in Manchester, New Hampshire, at the Holiday Inn on Brown Ave on Thursday and Friday. And we've got Chip Osborne, who does one full day on Thursday, and he's certainly worth the price of admission, which in this case would be nothing. If any of you guys do want to come and attend, just let me know, and we'll make sure we got a spot for you. We've got about 8 spots left, so if anybody wants to take a drive, that'd be cool. The agenda is available at our website, thelawntrepreneurs.com. If you want to check that out, click over there and you can look at it. So as we kind of ramp up to this third session here, I want to do a quick review of some things. As you know, today's workshop is today's session is the third installment of our fourth quarter workshop, and we're doing these on Tuesdays from November 18th to December 16th at 1 o'clock. Right now, I've noticed of all the people that are on, several of you have just joined us for the first time live. And I've posted recorded versions of our sessions also at thelawntrepreneurs.com. And please, if you need to catch up, go ahead and check them out there. I usually will post it the day before the following session, so like I put up last week's yesterday. Just to quickly review, on the first session was all about the renewal. Second session was kind of analyzing your previous year's data. Today we're going to talk about projections. We're going to talk about initial budgeting and how to project what's going to happen next year based on the analysis that we did of the previous year that we did last week. So I know I talked to a bunch of you guys who had taken notes, and you've got a lot of those statistics ready to kind of implement into what we're going to talk about today. Next week we'll talk about the marketing plan that's going to allow us to execute the projections that we determine this week. And then the final workshop of the session is about your sales process, on how you're going to make the sales on the leads that are generated from your marketing plan that you developed based on the projections that you were able to gather from the analysis of the previous year. And the money you're going to use is based on the renewal. Everybody get it? right? So we're actually trying to make some sense here. And you know, like we said, the lawn care danger zone is that place where you just become sort of overwhelmed, become a little bit overwhelmed with all the data and cash flow, and if you don't know your numbers, and how that can cause you stress, and how your stress begins to help make things get out of control, and how keeping and finding, you know, good people becomes more difficult. And everybody knows that massive cycle that we get stuck in. And that's what we call the lawn care danger zone. So the goal here is that at the conclusion of all of this, you'll have a legitimate roadmap for what you're going to do next year, which is going to help reduce that stress associated with the danger zone. So I want to review very quickly, and I'm going to allow you to ask questions if you'd like as we go through this. Obviously, we've already reviewed the renewal once, but for all the new people who haven't had the chance to ask any particular questions with each segment, I'm just going to fire through these relatively quick. One of the best things about this workshop so far is that we've kept it to an acceptable length, which is about 45 minutes and no more than that. I know when we're watching the recorded version of it, after the fact, there's nothing worse than listening to me ramble on like I'm doing right now. So let's just rock and roll. The renewal is really your final chance to engage your customers. The ultimate goal is to drive cash. Cash flow is to get through your off season, and how to cash needed to implement a marketing campaign. Your renewal needs to be a 3-phase implementation. You've gone beyond that first phase for the most part. That first phase is typically your last visit to the home, and then the second and third phase revolve around getting that renewal information in your customer's hands a couple different ways. You need to always have that renewal revolving around offers, calls to action, and deadlines. As with anything, as with any campaign that you ever run, there needs to be an offer, a call to action, and a deadline. And there needs to be simple vehicles for action. What that means is that it needs to be simple for your customer to be able to pay you or to renew. You don't want to make anything complicated. As we get further and deeper into the off-season here, as much as you don't want to admit it, your customers don't care about you. It's not that big of a deal to think about the lawn guy when it's December. So you want to make everything as simple as you possibly can. So last week we talked about how to analyze your existing sort of or your previous year operations. And the takeaway from your business analysis is that you absolutely need to know your numbers. And in order to know your numbers, you have to kind of calculate them. You have to acknowledge them. And we've determined that your business runs through 4 key segments: your product and service, your operations, marketing, and finance. Those are the 4 key segments to running your business. Segments 2, 3, and 4 are by far the most important of all the segments. And even though most of us consider segment 1 to be the most important segment. And man, Dick, maybe Dick can remind me. One of our guys, or one of the people we've been talking to about joining the Be Safe Network, had an awesome line just this week, and I wrote it down and I put it in here. I'm not a business owner. I'm a guy that owns a business, right? And Dick just stuck his head in here to acknowledge that. Who was that?
That was actually, I think he's online.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's right.
I'm a business owner. I own a business, but I'm not a businessman.
That's exactly right. I own a business, but I'm not a businessman. And that applies exactly to so many of us who found ourselves in this kind of, I don't want to say silly industry, but we're workers, we're hardworking people that have found our way into a business that we need to run, right? That we need to actually act like a business owner. And that can get complex. There are issues that we aren't necessarily trained or prepared to deal with, and you have to at least begin by acknowledging the fact that you can build a really sick rock wall is one thing, but everything. That's right, Ellen. Yep, it was Donovan. That's what Dick just came in and reminded me of that, and it's absolutely true. You need to be able to run that stupid business. And if you can't run that stupid business, it doesn't matter how sick your rock walls are, right? It makes no difference. So that's what we try to kind of focus on with this particular workshop. It's very important to, once you've analyzed all of that data, to simplify things. We talked about your core service and your supplemental services. and things that are you really need to focus on the most efficient things. And by efficient, we mean things that make the most money, things that are the most operationally easy, right? You don't want to, I think the term that we used was, if that service is a real pain in the ass, you may not want to offer it anymore. And I brought up spring aeration. I always disliked spring aeration because in the springtime we were just, we're rocking and rolling. You get in a rhythm, and everybody wants to have their application that day. And all hands on deck. Every single truck is out doing as many treatments as possible. And if all of a sudden you got 3 aerations, it's like, man, we're going to lose a lot just to try to do these squeaky wheel services. So you have to simplify things. The only way you can simplify things is by knowing what's too complicated. And finally, you have to make sure that you're tabulating, quantifying, and articulating all of those key statistics. You need to actually make sure that you've got them written down or in a report, or if you're not using a software or a CRM, if it's just an Excel, that's fine too. But you need to know what all of those actual numbers are. Is there any questions as we've kind of reviewed the previous first couple of sessions before I get going on the next one? Couple of comments, but yep, you're absolutely right. So the next phase of this entire process is, how do we project? We've looked at all of those numbers. We've looked at what our core service is. We've looked at what that pain in the ass service is. We know what we're good at. We know what we're getting, and everything revolves around these four elements when we talk about this time of year. Analyze and simplify, plan, implement, adjust. We're in the analyze and simplifying, or we've completed the analyze and simplifying part of things. We know what we need to do. The next step is to develop a plan. We need to kind of spell out a roadmap. The implementation of it comes later on, when you're actually on the road and getting the work done. And then the adjustment part is nothing ever goes as you plan it to go. Is there anybody on this line who writes a plan and then it works exactly as you think it's going to go? That never happens. So you always have to make adjustments. But those adjustments are based on all of the previous work you've done to kind of measure things. So at the conclusion of today's session, when we're talking about budgeting and planning and projecting the following year, you should have a somewhat detailed sketch of what your following year is going to look like, or what it should look like. I always say should, because it's going to end up not specifically looking exactly like that. But this is the initial phase to develop what that projection looks like. You'll have determined your gross sales, or your projected gross sales, your revenue by service. You're going to develop a sales goal. The sales goal is how many sales you're going to need to make to come up with the growth that you want to achieve. We're not going to have a marketing plan yet. Remember, that's the next session. That marketing plan is based on that sales goal that you come up with. And the example that we're going to use is not going to be a very unachievable sales goal. It's going to be an easy sales goal to hit, that, just so we can spell it out. You're going to have an initial gross margin in your cost of goods sold, and you're going to have production flow and initial cash flow analysis. So just let me ask the question, and since we started, the number of people on the line has actually doubled, and I hope most of you have caught up. How many people are on this call actually do this work in advance of a season, where you have your cash flow projections, and you've got your production projections, and you've got all of that detailed budget analysis? Is there anybody on the call who actually goes through the process of doing all of that? Well, nobody's answering, so I guess we're all going to learn something today. I assume that most of you have some sort of a version of this, because you have to. If you don't, you're just flying completely blind, and I know some of us fly completely blind, and that's not always healthy. We're immediately smack dab in the middle of the danger zone when we do that. But whether it's a sketch on a piece of paper, or on the notes app on your iPhone, and all that kind of stuff, everybody usually has at least somewhat of a roadmap. but you want to be as detailed as possible. So we're going to talk about three things when we talk about projections. We're going to do what I'm calling the snapshot. How much do you want to grow? What is it that you want to do next year? How do you feel about the following year? Do you want to, just kind of break even? Do you want to double your business? We're going to develop a snapshot that kind of shows all of the things that you need to have involved there. Then we're going to look at a P&L, an actual budget, which is going to demonstrate your gross margin, your administrative expenses, and your net profit. And then finally, we're going to look at cash flow and how that cash flow is what drives you crazy. If you ain't got no money, you're in big trouble, right? So you need to have that cash flow that's dependent on the services that you provide and so on and so forth. So at this point, we're going to kind of jump off, right? I'm going to open up, excuse my my messy, stand by now, stand by. Got it. Okay, sorry. So I'm going to work off of this spreadsheet for the remainder of our workshop here today. So I'm not going to have any slides. I'm just going to go right off of this spreadsheet. This is a sketch. This is exactly what you should be doing as you go into the absolute end of the year. Now, sometimes I lose sight of the fact that we're still in 2014. It was always a habit of mine as we planned and budgeted at Lawn Dog to make sure that on January 1st, I knew exactly what we expected to do. All of our planning was always done in November and December. So I know that sometimes when you're running your business, you're in the present day, but that's the challenge in order to be able to grow your business and run effectively. You have to do both, right? So if you're still doing cleanups or if you're plowing snow, you need to do this at the same exact time. I was always, months ahead in my head as we were on the calendar, and that's what this is all about. This worksheet becomes a snapshot for what's going to happen next year. In my opinion, it's absolutely imperative that you have it completely finalized by January 1st. And that, it's the beginning of December, but the holidays, things get away from us very quickly. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about how we're going to plan next year. So this initial, this part right here is the numbers that we worked on last week. It's a made-up company. It's just sort of fabricated. Actually, to tell you the truth, guys, as I went through this, I kind of wished I had made it a little bit bigger. Gross sales of $249,000. It's a small business. It might be might serve as a sort of a division in your bigger business, or if you're a smaller company or just getting going, maybe it is your entire business. But so what we did was we invented a company that had 450 customers. Their revenue per customer was $432. Their core revenue represented $194,000 in gross sales. And we decided that in this particular example, our core revenue was fertilization. We were doing fertilization treatments as our core service. That was our specialty. And then the supplemental services that revolved around that core revenue was ant, flea, and tick, lime, grub prevention, aeration, and seeding. We're keeping it as simple as possible, right? We're not offering a ton of other things. This is a very simplified business, which, in my opinion, is good. The fewer moving parts you have, the more that you can specialize in one particular type of service, the more scalable it becomes. The fewer moving parts, the fewer things there are to break, the fewer types of employees that you have. In my opinion, it's good to have that core service and then supplemental services that revolve around that service. And if you remember, we determined that this $6,200 was 3% of the 194. So these numbers become important as we project the following year. They aren't necessarily indicative of anything being successful or how to sell anything. We just know that the $6,200 is 3% of our total core revenue, right down the line, from lime to grub preventive to aeration and seeding. So last year we did $55,000. We had total sales of $249,000, $249,890. We're not looking at discounts. We're not talking about anything else. We're not looking at expenses. These are our gross sales. This is our core service. These are the supplemental services we offer. This is the revenue that generated. Okay? Any questions? Does everybody get that? That's what we did last year. These are the numbers that we identified as being important last week. We're not talking about sales sources. We're not talking about anything else. So say we don't want to blow it up. We only want to grow by 10%. Okay? We don't want to double our business. You know, to be completely honest with you, after I completed this whole worksheet, and I, you know, it's not something that I just found. I did it. I wish that I had grown the business by more than 10% because it would be easier to demonstrate our marketing plan. And I think I'll probably change it for next week. But for this sake, we want to grow our customer count by 10%. Okay, that's all we want to do. We don't want to go crazy. We just want to grow by 10%. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that information, and apply it to next year. 2015. Literally just this table right here is going to spell it all out. We're going to begin with 450 customers, right? That's where we're at here. We want to grow by 10%. We want to grow our customer count by 10%. If we're going to do that, we got to get to 495 customers. Okay, that represents a 10% growth in customer count. One thing we didn't talk about last week, and we should have, is our cancel percent. Because for every new sale you make, or from every year to year, people are going to cancel. And in fertilization, the turnover rate's a little bit higher than what you're accustomed to doing. So a very low, or actually a very low cancel rate would be 12%. A certain number of your customers, some are going to die, some are going to move, some are going to run out of money, some are going to be mad at you. 12% of your customer base is a very low cancel rate. Keep in mind, a company like Lawn Dog now, or True Green, or those big corporate lawn care services, they're canceling 40 to 50% of their customers every single year. As an independent business, as a small business, you're going to be able to offer much better customer service and response. So the 12% is a fairly good target. However, guys, listen, you need to tabulate what your cancel rate was. And when you find out what it was, you need to use that number for next year. Don't ever tabulate your cancel rate based on how you feel. You always want to put your cancel rate on what actually happened. If you've got an 18% cancel rate and you say, golly gee, I think I'm going to try harder next year and I'm going to budget for 11%, guess what? That's not going to work. You always need to budget statistically what actually happened. Remember, we talk about how all of this becomes a math equation, okay? So if last year we had a cancellation rate of 12%. So we're starting at 450 customers. We want to get to 495. We know that 12% of 495 are going to cancel. So 67 are going to be taken away. In order to hit that 10% growth, we need to make 112 sales. That's a lot of numbers all at once. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to everybody? Nobody's asking any questions, so I'm assuming it does make sense. You have your beginning count. You have your cancels, which are based on your new count. And then you have the sales that need to bring you there. Now remember, our revenue per customer is $432 on our core service. We got this directly from last year. If you're going to jack your prices, you can kind of change, add an extra category here. You can have old customers and new customers. But for the most part, you know that history repeats itself. Your revenue per customer is going to be about $432. 432 times 495 is $213,840. That is what we will project for our core service revenue. Our lawn care revenue will be, at the conclusion of the year, $213,840. Now, we need to project what our optional or our supplementals are going to be. Remember this number up here from last week? We knew that based on this core revenue gross sales number and this percent of it, that we can assume that 3% of the core revenue number is going to translate into that supplemental sale. So we carry those numbers right down here. And we take that 3% of this projected gross sale, and then we get our optionals. It's all a math equation. And after you do it for many years, that math equation becomes so repeatable and so scalable that you want it to be boring. Now, this is why I always say that the more you simplify, the more long-term things are going to get easy. So if you've got in this, this group of things, if you've got, 25 different services, and especially if you're in the construction or design business, those numbers fluctuate a lot. I hear it all the time. Man, I had an awesome year with construction last year. 2 years ago I had a terrible year. One or two big jobs can have such a huge impact on everything that you do. Now, I don't want you to change your business completely. I don't want you to change exactly what you're doing. But in my opinion, this is my opinion because I've done this before, the fewer moving parts, the more easy it is to project because it literally becomes a math equation from year to year. Right? So we've determined, any questions? All right. So now we know that we're going to have gross sales in 2015 of $273,000. It's our core service plus our supplementals. We know that based on the previous year, we're going to have to write off 5%. That's high. We know that's high. Does anybody want to answer why that's so high? Can anybody remember why that's so high? You're giving away $14,000. Yep, you're exactly right. Because of the discounts that we gave during our renewal process to generate cash flow to be able to subsidize what we're going to do in the off season with marketing. So a lot of this is based on that. In most cases, you can give away as much as 10% of a prepaid discount to get people to renew. You drive in cash. You're driving cash, so once you take away that $13,000, which is 5%, your net sales, $260,219. So again, we're talking about a real small business. You need at least this much to make it work. That's why I wish I kind of put together a business with much more, many more customers and gross sales. Because if you're not doing this much, you're kind of in trouble. You have to kind of work up to this. So when we do our marketing plan for next year, I'm going to change the numbers a little bit. The problem was that I got a little bit ahead of myself, and by the time I realized I wished I had more, and this happened last week with the numbers that we chose, you have to go back and change everything because everything is related to everything, right? So if I wanted to change it, it doesn't just affect this bottom line. It affects everything else too. So just make note of the fact that we're not talking about a huge business. Your business should be bigger than this. If it is this size, your business should be planning to increase more than 10%. Okay, because you can do it. You're going to have the cash flow to be able to do it. So now we know what our sales are going to be. This is our sort of overview of what we're going to project to do in 2015. So now the scary part. I'm going to scroll down and quickly just kind of give you an idea of what we have to do next. This is all of our expenses. This is how we're going to run the business. I'll scroll down here and scare you even more. Let's go back up here, though. This is really just a report coming out of QuickBooks, and you can use it directly in QuickBooks as a budgeting tool, or you can use a template. You can build it without formulas built into it. It doesn't have to be as detailed as this. It can be more detailed than this if you want. But here's how we're going to make this work. We have program sales of $213,000. See? Our core revenue, our program sales, $213,840. Special sales of $60,074. That's your supplemental services. Those are the things that revolve around your core service. They are these things. Okay? Your gross sales, $273,914. Once we determine what our discounts are going to be, your discounts, to get right down to it, bad debts and write-offs from the previous year, price adjustments and discounts, and prepaid discounts. You should take these numbers from the following year and apply them to the next year. This is, just a little bit of an estimate because I don't have any actual working numbers. But if the previous year you wrote off, if you could not collect, 2% of your sales, apply that 2% to this number. Same thing goes with price adjustments and discounts. What that means, guys, is when you've got a customer that you're going to do free lime for, or if you're going to do an aeration and you're going to do the seeding at no charge. Don't ever do anything for free. Don't do it at zero. Build it in, charge them for it, and then discount it out. You always want to represent your gross sales appropriately. Don't ever do anything for free. Bill it, and then back it out. So you want your numbers to reflect as much reality as possible. Here's the big nut here, the prepaid discounts. You're giving away $12,000 in prepaid discounts. But it's worth it. It's like taking a loan because people are going to pay you in advance, and there's nothing better than not having to chase money. Statement fees are late fees. If you're going to charge somebody, if you give somebody net 30, and if they're late, you add up a couple percents on. That can add up to a lot if you want it to. Sometimes you don't want it to. So your total income after discounts and everything else and statement fees, $260,000, $719,000, right? That's how much you're going to collect. That's how much cash is going to go through your business. Any questions so far? You're all very quiet, so hopefully that means I'm being clear. This is no fun. This isn't a lot of fun. These are statistics. These are numbers. These are those 3 other phases. Yeah, you build really sick rock walls, but do you know how to budget cost of goods sold? If you don't, then your business isn't going to be successful. You're going to have to find somebody who's going to be able to do it for you. Okay? So your total income, $260,000. Now remember last week when we talked about the gross margin and cost of goods sold, what your expenses should be in relation to your gross sales? In our industry, there are 3 things that make up the cost of goods sold: wages, products, trucks. Production wages, products, trucks, and equipment. These are the things that make up our cost of goods sold in order to determine what our gross margin is. And we used a 50% gross margin as our target. What you should do, guys, is look at exactly what you did the previous year. Okay, so whether or not you've kind of closed out your books so you can project what they're going to be. If you need to meet with your accountant, if you need to delay this process a little bit until you meet with your accountant, you can project it out. Make sure that you find out if something's out of whack, first of all. If you find out that your production wages or your wages on the road are representing 60% of your gross margin or 60% of your gross sales, man, you've got some changes to make. And Ellen and Donovan had sent me a link to that Lawn and Landscape magazine that told us what acceptable statistics were. I'll post that too. I'll post that at the Lawntrepreneurs, and we talked about it last week, and I forgot to look at it. Hopefully, I'm in line here because I'm going on my numbers, not what the numbers in Lawn and Landscape are. Hopefully, they're close. So you're going to budget 15% of your gross sales to be spent in production wages. And this is working out just about right. 15% is $41,000. That's about the equivalent of 1 production person, or maybe 1.5, or whether you're laying somebody off or they're working full-time or whatever. But that's about right for 1 person to do this much work. 1 person can definitely handle 495 customers when we're talking about fertilization. That's working every day, doing lawns every single day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week. So that lines right up. It's going to be a little bit different depending on what part of the country you're in and whatnot, but, it's never exact. Your products and services, which means the things that you apply, your fertilizers, your soil amendments, your weed controls, 20%. $54,000 is what you've got budgeted to spend on products. That's what you're going to spend on things to apply to lawns. And finally, with trucks, roughly 15%. $41,877. I was going to say I don't know why this doesn't match this exactly, but it's because we've got ones plugged in there. Okay, so you're going to spend about $42,000 on trucks and equipment. That includes fuel, your truck payments, the depreciation on your trucks. These are things that your accountant can help you with too, depending on how they hit the P&L. You know, if you need to buy new equipment, if you need a new spray tank, a new spreader, equipment, trucks and equipment, right? So that brings us to, here we go, we were talking about cost of goods sold of $138,536 with gross profit. And there's our margin. That's our gross margin. Any questions, guys? Does that make sense? Am I making sense? It's all math. It's all an equation. How am I doing on time? I'm going too long. I'm going to try to finish up. Not finish up, but I'm going to try to pick it up a little bit. Everything else now is what we call administrative expenses. These are expenses that go along. It's your overhead, essentially. The things that keep the lights on, right? So you could be as detailed or as not detailed as you want to be, always looking at the previous year to help budget the following year. So trash removal, you got to get the dumpster emptied, right? Your rent we have here is $15,000. Utilities, telephones, charitable donations. This company is not offering any benefits. You're too small at this point to offer any benefits, but this is where it would go. Recruiting expense, employee incentives would be bonuses you pay to somebody. Licenses and permits, office expenses, right down to the water cooler, right? Oh, no water cooler this year. Sorry, kids, it's not in the budget. So all of your office expenses, the depreciation on those that office equipment. Postage, which has gone down drastically. Not many of us use postage like the way we used to. Printing, if you need to print statements, if you're going to print, leave behinds, things that go along with operational expenses, not marketing, but operational printing. Your professional fees, which means your accountant, your banker, and your lawyer. And payroll, right? All those people, if the sink's leaking, you call the plumber, right? I don't ever want to try to be my own lawyer. Travel and entertainment, when you go down to GIE, this is where you put that. When you go to a meeting somewhere that you need to drive and you need to fill up with fuel, this is you, not your production. Your production fuel goes up in cost of goods sold. Uniforms. Now marketing. So when I built this is about where I said, man, I wish I had planned on making more sales. Your marketing expenses should always be about 10% of the revenue it's going to generate. So if you're going to generate, in this case, let's go way back up here. We're going to make 112 sales at $495. I always do round revenue or your core service revenue, 112 times 495. We're only generating $55,000 in new business, in new core business. So my marketing expenses down here, where'd it go? I have $6,000. 10% would be $5,544. So we'll budget a little bit more. But you always want this number to be about 10% of what you're going to sell, right? That's an acceptable number to plug in there. And that's what we'll talk about next week, how we build that marketing plan to kind of get what we need for those new sales. Administrative wages, right? So this is where, again, where I wish I kind of used different numbers. But this is how you pay people who run the business, management and administrative. So this could be you, but because this is a small business, and you're going to need to make more than $25,000 obviously, you could be doing the work too. So if this is your only business, you're going to be out on the road. Maybe you're not going to generate or do all of these gross sales. Maybe you have somebody for 6 months a year. So that number right there, that management wage, that's basically you, and you can share in that from production wages to management wages. Admin is somebody to work in the office. Usually that's going to be more than that. In this case, it might not be full-time. It might be a little bit part-time. You can add more gross sales to spend more at administrative. Finally, taxes and insurance, everything that really is kind of a fixed cost, things that you don't have a whole lot of control over. Once we get down to it, this particular budget has a net profit of 6% or $15,000. Now, usually you aim for 20%, and this was, I always wrote budgets to run 20% on the bottom line, and then I know I'd mess up and hopefully come in close to 10%. These numbers are a little bit awkward in that it's a one-man show. We're taking wages from management wages. We're taking wages from production expenses. If you can make $15,000 on a $250,000 business, that's not bad. Okay, but I don't want you to take these numbers as gospel. It's a made-up company. So I got a couple questions here. Let me take a breath and look at them. Questions about marketing. You know what? I'm going to defer on those marketing questions until next week, because we're going to actually build a marketing plan to make these sales, right? So right now we're just trying to do projections. When we talk about the costs associated with printing, door hangers, collateral, that kind of stuff, those should all be very, very small expenses. And you kind of got to go. You kind of have to go on what's worked before. So, Mike, I know you've always run those flyer ads. So, and if they're working for you, that's great. In most markets, those particular ads don't work that well. But if you can look at what happened last year, and the cost associated with it is acceptable, and you can do it again this year, you can pretty much expect the same thing to happen. Remember, we're talking about a math equation. If you just do the same thing over and over again, you're good to go. But we'll talk about marketing next week. So cash flow, right? So this is a table of our actual cash in and cash out. This is what runs our business. When we run out of money, we're in trouble. Let's start with these two tables here, cash in and cash out. What we do is we look at our monthly cash in. This is not our monthly production. This is not our monthly billing. When you do a job, you don't automatically get paid for it that same day. A lot of times you leave a bill and you wait for the cash to come in. What I want you to do is look at the previous year by month. Determine your total that came in the door, and to determine how much of that came in the door each month. That's what this percent is. So these numbers are basically, these are old lawn dog type numbers. I think I looked at a smaller branch. This is how the cash in percent worked. Look down here in December. November and December should be by far your most or your best cash flow months of the entire year. Anybody want to tell me why? You are correct, sir. Dave, you are right, because of the renewal. Because you begin to leave your phase 1 of your renewal starts in November. Phase 2 and 3 keep going into December. So these are prepayments. These numbers don't match up exactly with the current fiscal year. So you've got cash coming in January here, and that's cash that's based on services that may have been done the previous August. So it doesn't always work exactly or specifically. I matched it up here on purpose just to prove a point. But the number, the actual raw cash that comes in is not always, in fact, is never associated specifically with that existing fiscal year. You might be collecting money in February for work that was done in November. Cash flow is way different, completely different than production flow and gross sales. Cash is very different. In fact, you could probably do a whole segment on that. So look at the total cash in as a percent of the total that came through the door. What percent came in by month? Okay? Then take your projections and apply that. It's not going to work out exact. Never going to work out exact because we're dealing with multiple years. At the end of the year, you got people paying for next year, and at the beginning of the year, you got people paying for services done the previous year. So what you can do actually, and I don't have it here, is have November and December of the previous year, January, February, March, and then November and December of the following year. But you always want it to be a math equation again. So you want to budget that cash based on what happened the previous year. Do the same thing with cash out. I know I'm a broken record, but the more years in a row you do this and the more detailed your record keeping is, the more effective your projections are going to be. I'm at 45 minutes, so I want to try to wrap up. In this particular scenario here, you guys, now this is why, I'll show you something. This is why the last couple months have been kind of scary. over the last month, and in reality has been scary for a lot of companies. You got your cash in, you got your cash out, you got your net by month, and then your cumulative. I can't see it because of things up on my screen. You lose money almost all year. That's not to say you lose money on your actual P&L. As far as cash flow goes, you're in the negative until you get to December. November and December, and as you mature, as your business gets bigger and better, September and October you get into the positive. So you need to have some sort of a strategy to carry this. A lot of times, you guys, it's like credit cards or something, and that's a dangerous thing to get into, but it can be money carried over from the previous year. This is just cash flow, okay? So you're negative $10,000 in April. That's because you're paying for products that you ordered in the winter and you bought to be applied in March, April, and May. But you don't go into the black until, in this particular case, November or December. And when we get a lot of snow, if you leave money on the table in October or November, you're in big old trouble. So that's just the nature of our business. Now, there are certain things that you can implement to reduce the pain of that, but it's always good to have some sort of a line of credit, or if you have to, obviously, float some things on credit cards or something like that. Or just use cash from the previous year. This is cash flow. You need some way to be able. So what I'm trying to say is, if we go way back over here in our initial, if we're starting with $50,000 in the bank, watch what happens. It changes everything. Your cumulative is much different because you're starting with 50, right? Does that make sense to everybody? Again, it's interesting because we're talking about how, we're lawn guys or we're landscapers who are running businesses, and that quote totally applies in that, are we, hold on, I'm reading questions. We're guys that run businesses, not necessarily business guys. Okay, any questions, guys? Before we wrap up, here comes a couple good. I was beginning to wonder where everybody was. Excellent, Ellen. See, that Ellen brings up a good point. Here's another strategy that you can use to minimize that pain at the end of the year. And Mike, I know you do this too. Ellen says we set up our customers on 12-month payment for 8 months of service, which takes us through the winter, and they automatically renew. That's a way to minimize that strain of cash flow. If you've got people paying for services all year long for 12 months a year, and you're not actually providing those services for 12 months of the year, that's a strategy to minimize that cash pain. And again, in fact, Mike will tell me that one of the best things he's ever done is change to his operating system as Service Autopilot, and that really makes it easy for him to do automatic billing, things like that. Don't forget to take advantage of these tools that make things easier for you, that automate things. It's important. The question is about gross margin. So the question is about how maintenance. Yeah, okay, so your core service is going to kind of dictate what this gross margin is all about. So if your core service is not fertilization, but your core service is maintenance, if you're doing, mowing, and your supplemental services might be like cleanups and pruning, that kind of deal, but still your core service, your cash driver is that mowing. That's going to change your cost of goods sold. Your targets should still be 50%, but you're going to spend a lot more on wages and a lot less on products. I would absolutely look at what you've done previously in previous years and make sure that you're at as close to 50% as possible. But yes, it is true that your cost of goods sold is going to vary based on the types of services that you do. With fertilization, your product costs are higher because every time you go to somebody's house, you're applying product. If every time you go to somebody's house, you're mowing the property, your wages are going to be higher, and your equipment is probably going to be a little bit higher too. Good question, though. question is, do I really think that it's important to offer that much of a prepaid discount? I do. I really do, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that as you go down here and you look at this cash in, for November and December to be your best month of the year, that totally covers your ass in the winter. If you're in a northern market, right? If you're in a market where you're just going 100% year-round, this is a very different story. But most of us work in markets where there's at least a beginning and an end. And I think it's important to offer that discount. Remember when we were talking about the 3 phases of the renewal plan, you need an offer, a call, a discount, and a call to action, not in that order. But that offer has to be to pay less in exchange for paying in advance. And that drives that cash flow that allows you to be okay over the winter, and also allows you to make an investment in marketing. And again, this wasn't the best example because I only grew the business by 10%. And most of us, if we're being honest, we want to grow by more than 10%. If you're on this call, you're more aggressive than 10% per year. So when we talk about marketing next week, I'm going to change the numbers to make it more difficult, to make it harder. All right, last chance. Any other questions? I don't want to go longer than an hour if I don't have to, so that we can keep this recording to a digestible length. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. Remember, we've got live training in Manchester on Thursday and Friday if you're interested. Anybody who wants to shoot over, just shoot up to Manchester. No big deal. We still have spots. If you want to have a follow-up call regarding any of this stuff, man, that's what I'm here for, and I can help you. I can help you do it. And I will post this video on the Launchpreneurs probably a week from yesterday. So I'm going to wrap up. Thanks for joining me today, guys, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good afternoon.